Today on TimesCast, in the Midwest, public workers and lawmakers face off over collective bargaining and state budgets.
I'm a big football fan, but I also think that for an industry that's making $9 billion a year in revenue, they can figure out how to divide it up.
Tense labor negotiations between the NFL and its players threaten the fall season. And a formerly state-controlled newspaper in Libya reinvents itself.
There's been a lot of focus on Wisconsin lately, where there is an impasse going on in the legislature over legislation that would lessen the collective bargaining rights of public workers.
We need a leaner and cleaner state government. As we decrease state spending, we also increase flexibility.
But this has really become much more of a regional issue and kind of a larger referendum on a pretty basic question, which is whether public workers should have the right to collectively bargain, or whether some of these Republican leaders are in too desperate of situations and have to cut those rights in order to balance their budgets. In Ohio yesterday, the Senate passed legislation that would lessen the collective bargaining rights of public workers there. And the truth is, Democrats don't see a way of stopping this. They don't have control of that chamber, and Governor Kasich is expected to sign the legislation. So Ohio may have made the most progress on this at this point. In Indiana, meanwhile, there's other legislation that would, again, reduce what unions can do, particularly public workers. So the Democrats, as they did in Wisconsin, fled to Illinois in order to procedurally stop the vote. Tensions are really rising, and so it's building a set of issues, a divide that isn't going anywhere soon.
The NFL and the Players Union are still at odds over how to divide $9 billion in annual revenue. This fall season is at stake.
We're here in Washington, D.C., where, as you can see behind me, there's a lot of reporters waiting. The NFL's collective bargaining agreement with its Players Union expires at the end of the day today. Representatives of the owners and the union are at the federal mediator's office. They've been talking for 10 days now. They've made very little progress, which is why we anticipate that the union will decertify, basically going out of business. They've done this before. In the late 80s, there was a work stoppage in the NFL. That led ultimately to a settlement in the early 90s that gave the players free agency. So many of the biggest victories by the players have come in the courts, and that's the direction this is headed now. The union is expected to file for an injunction to block owners from locking them out. That would probably come tonight as well. It's hard to say what happens after that. There'll be a draft in April, but not much else about the future of the NFL is certain at this point, except that they're going to be spending an awful lot of time in courtrooms, unless, again, there's a breakthrough in talks later today or a mediator presses for an extension of the deadline.
And in Libya, free speech now flourishes at a formerly state-controlled newspaper.
This is David Botti reporting from Benghazi, Libya. Newspaper photographer Walid El Hafad sets out for another day of work to chronicle a city in the grip of revolution. As it turns out, his own paper, once called Corina, is in the midst of a sea change as well. Formerly owned by President Gaddafi's son, Saif al-Islam, it's changed its title to Yosperides, after an ancient name for Benghazi.
Now Yosperides is a newspaper with the street, with the revolution, with the people. It will take the people's concern to the outside world as a newspaper, as a website, as a voice of the people.
When Saif started the paper 4 years ago, he told staff it was to promote a new form of free speech. With Saif's backing, reporters could write critically of some officials without fear of retribution. But vital national topics, such as Gaddafi, his family, and his own policies, remained off limits. Reporters felt the heat.
You could not express yourself. You had a low ceiling and not enough space to express yourself. There was a lot of control.
Now, with a new name and new ideals, optimism pervades in the newsroom.
Now, we are breathing in freedom in the early morning.
Soon after the paper's staff broke with their old management in mid-February, their salaries were frozen. Now a committee of 7 jointly head the operation, and everyone, like Walid, is a volunteer.
Join us again tomorrow for TimesCast.